Right, welcome everybody to another series of At Home with Theosophy. We are going to see for six weeks this book written by Annie Besant, The Ancient Wisdom. We are not going to go through all the chapters. It is a rather thick book. I have selected some chapters for this series, and then we will see the remaining chapters in a future series. This book was written by Annie Besant as a kind of foundation for the Theosophical teachings for whoever wants to have a general knowledge of the Theosophical teachings. And she says that it is a basic book, although as you will see it goes quite a bit into details, and the explanation that we are going to share may help the study of the book. It's a classic book on Theosophy, and I'm sure you will enjoy it as I did and many of us did. The way we normally do this is I selected some excerpts from all the different chapters. Michelle is here going to read it for you. Then I will elaborate on the read. And at the end of the meeting we can have question and answers, some minutes for that. So let us start with the beginning of, we will begin with the chapter where Annie Besant talks about the physical plane. We are going to see how she describes all the different planes and the phenomena related to all the different planes. But Annie Besant begins with a brief explanation of how the cosmos is built, so that we can understand the nature of the planes in a deeper way.
Building the cosmos, coming forth from the depths of the one existence, from the one beyond all thought and all speech, a logos becomes the manifested God of his universe. Although the manifested form of spirit and matter of any universe are finite in their extent and transitory in their duration, the roots of spirit and matter are eternal. From this, the logos elaborates the matter of his universe, being himself its informing, guiding, and controlling power.
So in the Theosophical view, there is a reality which is, as Annie Besant says there, beyond all thought and all speech. It is beyond definitions and actually beyond the reach of the mind, the transcendental nature of this reality. This reality in the Theosophical view is a single reality. It's not that spirit and matter are two independent principles. There is one single reality from which what we call spirit and matter come. Now, from this or within this ultimate reality, at some point a logos appears. The word logos comes from the Greek, and it means several things. It means reason, it means word, it means intelligence or pattern. So the idea is that at some point some kind of intelligence appears in the universe. Of course, it is not an intelligence as we conceive it, the human kind of intelligence. Probably the manifestation of this intelligence on our level is what we call the laws of nature. And this intelligence appears, and from this intelligence comes what we would call spirit and matter. This intelligence itself is wrapped, so to say, in the root of matter, what will become matter in the universe. So it is from this one existence that is at the same time the potentiality for intelligence and for matter that the logos appears, and from there the cosmos is going to be built. So in the Theosophical view, there are 7 planes or dimensions of matter and space and consciousness. Annie Besant is going, I added this graphic here, or this table, so that that you can understand what Annie Besant is going to say next. In the Theosophical view, there are 7 of these planes. The highest of them, which sometimes is called with the Sanskrit word Adi, which means the highest or the first, is the plane from which, or in which the Logos awakens. On this level, everything is a unity. Matter and intelligence, as we said, they are 2 aspects of the ultimate reality. Then there is a process of differentiation in which what we call spirit and matter begin to, let's say, separate from each other. They begin to differentiate, and the deeper we go into this differentiation, the more different spirit and matter seem. On the highest plane, there is no difference. These are 2 aspects of the same reality. On the lowest plane, the physical plane, spirit and matter seem to be completely different and actually even at war with each other, even though they are 2 aspects of the same reality. So in the description of the planes, we have the first or the last plane according to where you start counting. The highest plane is Adi. Then the second plane, the one that emanates from Adi, is called Anupadaka. These are all Sanskrit words, because other philosophies don't have these words for the different planes. So Blavatsky used whatever words were available at the time. Now these 2 planes are said to be divine planes that are beyond even the intention of trying to understand them. And then there are 5 lower planes, from number 5 to 1, on which our being, what we call a human being, has existence. The highest of them all is called Atmic. It comes from the Sanskrit word Atma, which means self. This is the ultimate self, and is a plane that in Buddhism and Hinduism they call Nirvana. When a person becomes aware on this plane is what is said to be the person enters Nirvana. Then the next plane is the Buddhic plane, which the word Buddhi comes from the root Bud in Sanskrit, which means enlightenment. And this is the source of wisdom, of spiritual intuition, of a perception of reality in human beings. Then the next plane is the Manasic. It comes from the word manas, which means mind. The lower plane after that is the Kamic, and this means, the word Kama means desire. So this is the plane where our desires and our attractions and repulsions have a reality. And the last plane, Stula, means dense, and is the physical plane. So Annie Besant will go on now to explain how these planes are developed one from the other.
Of what occurs on the 2 higher planes, the 7th and the 6th, we can form but the haziest conception. The student may think of the 5th plane as atoms of Atma, the 4th plane as Atma enveloped in Buddhi matter, the 3rd plane as Atma enveloped in Buddhi and Manas matter, the 2nd plane as Atma enveloped in Buddhi, Manas, and Kama matter, the lowest as Atma enveloped in Buddhi, Manas, Kama, and Stula matter.
So you see the process that Annie Besant describes here is that from the reality of the Atmic plane, which is the highest, that is part of the field of human evolution, our consciousness that is on the Atmic plane gets wrapped up in this grosser kind of matter, which is the Buddhic matter. Then the Buddhic matter gets wrapped up in the Manasic matter, and then so on until it gets enveloped by the physical matter. And well, this is a process like if you have your hand and then you start putting one glove on top of the other. First a very thin glove, but with which you may still be able to perceive subtle differences of roughness or temperature. Then you put another glove, and then another, and the last glove is a very thick glove, and that would be a metaphor for our consciousness working through the physical body. So at the core of what we are this Atman, this self, but is wrapped up in all these different kinds of matter. Therefore, our perception is heavily conditioned when we perceive through the physical body. So now we will see a diagram that can symbolize this.
When a theosophist speaks of a plane, he means a region throughout which spirit matter exists, all whose combinations are derived from a particular set of atoms. These atoms in turn are living units, whose life is the life of the Logos, veiled in fewer or more coverings according to the plane. So
Besant calls what constitutes the plane's spirit-matter because every particle in the Theosophical view doesn't only have what we would call matter, but also has what we would call spirit and also energy. So the idea is that in every atom you have the spiritual life animating the atom. Of course, in separate atoms that spiritual life manifests in a very basic way, in what we call, for example, chemistry. The chemical reactions are an expression of the divine life at the atomic level. But then as we go on and up into more and more complex organisms in the process of evolution, the divine life that is intrinsic in the organism is able to express itself in more complex ways, as we are going to see. But the point here is, in this diagram, you see this is just a symbolic representation of what would be a physical atom. You have the core of it is Atman, the very source of ourself and the whole universe. And then you have all this wrapping of matter, of the different planes. So the physical atom would be this Atman wrapped up in 4 more layers, if we want to represent it this way. An atom on the kamic plane would have only these layers up to kama. So the mental plane has fewer layers. So the higher you go in the planes, the freer this atmic principle is, the less coverings it has. And this is going to be important when we go into exploring the reality of consciousness on all these different planes.
The cosmos is the result of the involution of the life of the Logos as the ensouling force in every particle, and its successive enwrapping in the spirit matter of every plane. The materials of each plane have within them, in a hidden or latent condition, all the form and force possibilities of all the planes above them, as well as those of their own. Evolution may be summed up in a phrase. It is latent potentialities becoming active powers.
So in religion there is always this problem of the relationship between spirit and matter. And many times matter is said to be evil, and in some religions is seen as absolute evil, and spirit is what is good. And then there is these two principles are completely separate. In the Theosophical view, in the very physical plane, or the very physical plane, is nothing but the atmic principle, the highest principle in our system of evolution, wrapped up in different kinds of matter. So from this point of view, we have that the divine is the essence of everything you see. Matter or energy or consciousness, whatever you talk about, the divine is the essence that is behind. But also the divine has its own reality outside the realm of matter. On the atmic plane, the divine is free from all these wrappings. or the physical plane is the divine with all these wrappings. So the idea is that this is a concept that is called in modern philosophy panentheism. You know, pantheism was the idea that the divine was in nature. But the idea that the divine is in nature and it is not anything more than nature is a different concept than the idea that the divine is in nature and yet it is transcendental. So there are these two aspects. And this is called now panentheism. So the theosophical view could be said to be panentheistic in the sense that it postulates that the divine is transcendental, but at the same time, everything we see around is nothing but the divine too.
Could you spell panentheism?
Panentheism is P-A-N. Pan means nature or the whole. Then E-N, panen, and then theism, as you know, T-H-E-I-S-M.
Okay. The physical plane. We can now turn to the detailed examination of the physical plane, that on which our world exists and to which our bodies belong. Examining the materials belonging to this plane, we are struck by their immense variety, the innumerable differences of constitution in the objects around us. Out of this confusion, 3 subdivisions of matter emerge as a fundamental classification. Matter is solid, liquid, gaseous.
Annie Besant and her colleague Leadbeater, they both had clairvoyance. Leadbeater had especially a very deep or let's say very developed clairvoyant ability, but Annie Besant also had. And at the end of the 19th century, they began to do some research into the nature of matter. They started publishing these results in theosophical journals, and they actually discovered some atoms that the science of the time did not know about. Actually, one of the scientists that won a Nobel Prize, Aston, when he discovered these atoms, a few decades after Besant and Leadbeater published these results, he mentioned that he had read their book, which is called Occult Chemistry, in which all these results were published, and that he didn't know how, but these people had discovered these atoms before he did with the machine that he had built. Actually, he used one of the names that Besant and Leadbeater invented for this atom, the meta-neon. He used that name. So what they saw when researching into the physical plane, how the atoms were constituted, is that there were 7 states of matter. The first 3 states of matter we all know are solid, liquid, and gaseous. But then there are 4 more states of matter according to Besant and Leadbeater. At the time where they were doing this research, some scientists were speculating about a 4th state of matter, which is what now science knows as plasma. Plasma is a 4th state of matter, which Besant and Leadbeater described at that time, you know, when science was still trying to figure out this new state. They described it as an etheric kind of state. So now next, Annie Besant will describe these 4 states of matter that are beyond the 3 that we normally perceive with our senses.
Searching further, we find a 4th condition, ether, and a minute search reveals that this ether consists in 4 conditions as well defined as those of solid, liquid, and gas.
So here you see the 3 lower states, and this is the 4th state that science was trying. Actually, the scientist that was working on this was William Crookes, and he was a member of the Theosophical Society. He was the one that was working on the 4th state of matter that he called radiant matter. This was before they discovered the existence of electrons and subatomic particles. They thought that the atom was a solid kind of billiard ball. Besant and Leadbeater said, no way, that the atom can be divided. Actually, that's what they were doing when they were trying to research into all these different states of matter. They say we can divide the atom, we can see the atom in all the different subatomic particles. So the etheric, as I said, is what we now would call plasma. And then they saw that there were two other states, and then there was the last state, that is what they call the true atomic or state of matter. You know, the word atom means that non-divisible. When scientists got to the chemical elements, they thought that they were not divisible, as I just said, a little billiard ball of calcium, of gold, of lead. They thought that you could not divide those little grains of matter, and they called that atoms. In time, they saw that the atoms can actually be divided. So in Theosophy, when they talk about atoms, normally they talk about the ultimate particle on the physical plane that cannot be divided. If you divide it, you just dissolve any physical matter. And that's what we are going to see next.
To take oxygen as an example, just as it may be reduced from the gaseous condition to the liquid and the solid, so it may be raised from the gaseous through 4 etheric stages, the last of which consists of the ultimate physical atom. The disintegration of the atom takes matter out of the physical plane altogether and into the next plane above.
So this is how the image you see here is how they described, how they saw this ultimate physical atom. If we go back, there were some chemists that tried to relate occult chemistry with the knowledge of atomic nature in regular science. One of them, very prominent in this field, is Stephen Phillips. And he said that the super etheric would be the subatomic particles by themselves, like neutrons, protons. Then you have the quarks that would be the subatomic. And what he says is that the real atoms in the physical plane would be these sub-quarks that science don't know anything about. Actually, he wrote a couple of papers. He called them omegons. You know, omega is the last word in the Greek alphabet. So he called these theoretical sub-quarks omegons. And he says that those are the real atoms that Besant Leadbeater saw. We don't know that yet. Maybe with this new particle accelerator that they built in Europe that has far more energy, maybe they can break down a quark. For the time being, that's far beyond our current technology. But they saw that the physical atom is like a bundle of strings. And actually, this scientist, Phillips, says that what Besant Leadbeater saw is similar to the superstring theory in quantum physics. So they saw that this is this kind of strings, that if you look further into the strings, they are formed by astral particles. So if you dissolve the strings, all you get is this group of astral atoms, and you don't have physical matter anymore. So it's like if you are removing in that symbolic image of the atom that I showed before, it's like if you are removing the exterior coat, and then you have an astral atom. So this is how they saw the constitution of physical matter. And of course there are many things that come from this, but we are not going to go into those details right now.
Building of physical forms. The fashioning of materials went on for countless ages. When it reaches a sufficiently advanced state, we come to the evolution of form, the building of organisms out of these materials.
So in her description of how the universe is built, she says that the first thing that is built is all the atoms and all the different combinations of these atoms for all the planes. So the first stage of evolution is building the atoms on the atmic plane, let's say, and then as you combine those atmic atoms, you get all the different subplanes within the atmic plane. Then you develop the buric atom, and again by combination you develop all the different planes, and so on until you get to the physical plane. to these ultimate atoms, the real atoms, and then by combining these atoms you get the subquarks, and then the quarks, and then the protons and neutrons, atoms, and then gases, liquids and solids. So that's the first stage in the manifestation of the universe. The second stage, as she says, is using this matter to create forms that can be a vehicle of consciousness, of different kinds of consciousness.
The monad evolves through the three elemental kingdoms and reached in due course the physical plane, forming the first minerals. That life is working in all minerals, although much cribbed, cabined, and confined.
As the universe develops forms, in the Theosophical view, the divine life begins to develop forms first on the higher planes, and then little by little develops forms on the lower and lower and lower planes. What we know is the mineral kingdom. That would be like the grossest aspect of matter and the organization of matter. But in the Theosophical view, before life developed what we call mineral kingdom, it went through some invisible kingdoms or some invisible forms, invisible because they belong to higher planes, not to the physical plane, which are normally called in Theosophy elemental kingdoms. As we are going to see in the future, in future lessons, these elemental kingdoms are very important because they compose the subtle bodies that we have. You know, we have the physical body, and the physical body is made of physical matter. Now we have also, as we are going to see, an emotional body, a mental body, and these bodies are made of emotional matter or mental matter, and the life that animates them are these elemental kingdoms. So it's important to keep them in mind, but we are going to explore them later. The point here is that what Annie Besant calls the monad, which is a center of consciousness that begins the process of evolution, first develops this or begins to evolve in what we call the first elemental kingdom on the higher mental plane, as we are going to see. Then it goes on to evolve in the lower mental plane, a kingdom that is more concrete, the second elemental kingdom. Then the third elemental kingdom is on the lower plane after the mental plane, which is the astral. And finally, life comes to begin to evolve through the mineral kingdom. This is a point where consciousness is the more limited by matter. In Theosophy, evolution goes in a U shape. It comes from non-material forms, goes down to the material kingdom, and then it starts evolving back into non-material forms gradually. So the first stage is coming down to the mineral kingdom.
Great stability of form having been gained in many of the minerals, the evolving monad elaborated greater plasticity of form in the vegetable kingdom, combining this with stability of organization. These characteristics found a yet more balanced expression in the animal world and reached their culmination of equilibrium in man.
So this is more or less the story of evolution that we know in science. You know, the idea that life evolved little by little from inorganic forms into simple organic forms, and then more and more complex. And when you see the effect, there is a problem in science that it cannot be explained. Why life evolves into forms that are more and more complex. You know, a bacteria, for example, is far more successful than a human being to live in the world. Bacteria can live in ice, in geysers, boiling water, can live in any climate. Maintaining a bacteria is very cheap from an energetic point of view. Maintaining a human being is very complex, very expensive from an energetic point of view. So it's not clear why life developed into more complex forms from the point of view that science normally looks at these things. There is no really justification. Now, from the theosophical point of view, the whole evolution is driven by consciousness trying to express itself in more and more fullness, so to say. So in a mineral kingdom, consciousness can only express itself in the form of what we call chemical reactions. The minerals can respond only to very strong pressure or temperatures, and it's a very limited response. Then in the vegetable kingdom, the vegetables develop the ability to respond to the sun, to weather. There is a far more responsive activity. Then the animal kingdom has the ability to respond even to what we call pain and pleasure, to feelings, which the vegetables are only beginning to develop. And in the human kingdom, we respond not only to physical and to vital and to emotional, but also to mental stimulus. So we can see how evolution goes to more complex forms so that consciousness can expand its activities.
Human body. Man's physical body has two main divisions: the dense body, made up of constituents from the three lower levels of the physical plane, solids, liquids, and gases, and the etheric double, violet-gray or blue-gray in color, interpenetrating the dense body and composed of materials drawn from the four higher levels. The general function of the physical body is to receive contacts from the physical world and send them inwards, as materials from which the conscious entity inhabiting the body is to elaborate knowledge.
So we are going to see what Annie Besant says here in the next slides. But basically, she's now going to examine the human body. She says there are two aspects, two divisions to what we call the physical body, the body that is made out of physical matter. Remember that we saw there are on the physical plane 7 states of matter. The 3 lower were the solid, gas, and liquid, and the 3 higher were these different kinds of ethers. So she says the dense body, the body that we perceive with our 5 senses, is formed of gases and solids and liquids. We all know that. Now she says there is also what she calls an etheric double, a double because it follows the form of the physical body and is made of this etheric matter. She says that when you see it from a clairvoyant point of view, it looks like violet gray or blue gray in color, and it interpenetrates the physical body and it goes a little outside the physical body. We will see a few images of this. Now, the idea of the physical body is the interface between consciousness and the physical world, the physical plane. And the idea is to serve as a window through which our consciousness can acquire experiences from the physical plane. If the physical body is not working, for example, for any reason the brain is not working, consciousness is not really affected by it. The problem is that then consciousness cannot express itself on the physical plane. Therefore, we are going to see that the way in which the physical body is built is important for consciousness, because the body is at the same time a window and a limitation. If you have a window that allows you to look outside, if the window is small or is dirty, it imposes a limitation on you. If the window is wide and clear, then it allows you to see more of the external world. So the physical body has a similar function, as we are going to see. So let's see about the etheric body.
Its etheric portion has also the duty of acting as a medium through which the life currents poured out of the sun can be adapted to the uses of the organism. The sun is the great reservoir of the electrical, magnetic, and vital forces of our system. and it pours out abundantly these streams of life-giving energy. They are taken in by the etheric doubles of all minerals, vegetables, animals, and men, and are by them transmuted into the various life energies needed by each entity. This appropriated life is called prana.
So the idea is that there is what we call vitality. In Western philosophy, there is always this problem, whether life is an independent principle or not. In science, in current science, most scientists say that life is not an independent principle. It's just a function of the chemistry of the body. But several philosophers, even in the 20th century, which was philosophy was quite dominated by the scientific view, the materialistic scientific view, several philosophers postulated that life is an independent principle. And that's what Theosophy was saying from the late 19th century. There is a vital principle which comes from the sun. So from the sun we don't only have the light, which the plants and some bacteria and fungi generate, or by means of the photosynthesis generate mass that then the animals eat, and that then we can eat from it. So the sun is the source of life at the physical level, the generation of biomass, but also the sun generates this vitality that we call prana. Now this vitality is generated in a kind of raw state. It is the etheric double that we have with the physical, the one that transmutes this raw vitality into a form that the body and the cells can use. So one of the function of the etheric double is to transmute this raw prana so that it can be used by the organism, whether it is in a plant or in an animal or in a human being.
The etheric doubles draw in, specialize, and distribute them over their physical counterparts. It has been observed that in vigorous health, much more of the life energies are transmuted than the physical body requires for its own support, and that the surplus is rayed out and is taken up and utilized by the weaker.
This is something that they have observed clairvoyantly, that some people generate more prana or transmute more prana that they can use. So around people who have good health, there is like an atmosphere of vitality. And many times people who get close to these healthy people, they can use this surplus of vitality. So it's some kind of sharing that we do unconsciously. The etheric double and this surplus of vitality is part of what we could call the health aura. It's part of the auras Annie Besant is going to explain.
What is technically called the health aura is the part of the etheric double that extends a few inches from the whole surface of the body and shows radiating lines, like the radii of a sphere, going outwards in all directions. These lines droop when vitality is diminished below the point of health and resume their radiating character with renewed vigor.
So here you have an artistic representation of the etheric double. As you see, it goes a few inches outside the body. It is seen normally as radiant, and around it you have this prana, especially in people who are in good health. The other image you have here is an actual photograph with a special method that is called the Killian Method. And the Killian method of photography perceives a little aura around different objects, even plants or minerals, and it's possible that aura is the etheric double. I'm not completely sure if it is the whole etheric double or it is the magnetic activity that comes out of our body, which nevertheless is related to the etheric double. So this is a thumb that is pressed on the photographic plaque or plate that they use, and you can see that there is a radiation from the center outside, as Annie Besant describes, and this would be the prana that is circulating through the etheric double. When a person is not in good health, that radiation is diminished in the thickness of it, and also begins to not to be so straight out, but be kind of curvy, and so these are, since the etheric double is still within the physical plane, it can be perceived by physical instruments. When we come to other subtle or subtler bodies, then it's a little more difficult to be able to perceive them with physical matter.
It is this vital energy specialized by the etheric double, which is poured out by the mesmerizer for the restoration of the weak and for the cure of disease, although he often mingles with it currents of a more rarefied kind. Hence the depletion of vital energy shown by the exhaustion of the mesmerizer, who prolongs his work to excess.
At the end of the 19th century, this idea of mesmerism was quite well known. Mesmer was a scientist that had developed the idea of what he called animal magnetism, because he said today maybe we would call it biomagnetism. By animal he meant it's a kind of magnetism, not the one that comes from magnets, from minerals, but it's a magnetism that belongs to biological entities. And he was talking basically about prana, the prana that is specialized in our etheric double, and that we can pass on to another person. Now the problem is that if you pass on your prana to another person, you are depleting yourself of energy. If you have this surplus, you can do it without any damage to yourself, but if you do it too much, then you lose your vitality. Now she says, Annie Besant, so the technique that the mesmerism uses is a quite rough technique. Just by using your willpower, you project your prana. She says that sometimes a more rarefied kind of energy may be moved. I suppose that she's talking more about the universal prana that is around. Later in the 20th century, different methods of energy healing were developed, and most of them claim that they are not using your own prana, your own vitality, that they are using more, the general vitality around. So I don't know enough about these methods, and I'm not clairvoyant to determine whether, one technique would move one or the other kind of energy. But it does seem there seems to be these two possibilities. If you are using your vitality, that may not be very good for you. If you have access to this more collective vitality, then that shouldn't be a problem.
Man's body is fine and coarse in its texture according to the materials drawn from the physical plane for its composition. Each subdivision of matter yields finer or coarser materials. A coarse body can be refined, a refined body coarsened. The body is constantly changing, each particle is a life, and the lives come and go. They are drawn to a body consonant with themselves. They are repelled from one discordant with themselves.
So here we come to an interesting concept. As we said, our physical body is made of matter from all these different 7 states, which in Theosophy, these 7 different states of matter of a particular plane, in this case a physical plane, they are called subplanes. So there are 7 subplanes within a plane. So we have matter in all the different states, from all the different subplanes. But within each one of the subplanes, there is matter that has a different kind of, let's say, magnetism. So we have physical or solid matter, or liquid matter, to talk about states of matter. We have solid matter, which can be purer or coarser from a spiritual point of view. If you see the atoms will be exactly the same, but the kind of magnetism that they have associated seems to be different. So as we go through life, it seems that the body begins to act as a kind of filter and retains the kind of atoms that are vibrating with the particular rate of magnetism that your body has, and let's go of the atoms that are either subtler or grosser in the magnetism than the ones that you normally have. So you can, but we are going to see what determines that magnetism in your body, but your body may become subtler or coarser from an esoteric point of view. At the level of atoms, you just have atoms, but from the point of view of how the magnetism that is associated to them, you can purify your body or make it coarser according to certain facts that we are going to see.
A pure body repels coarse particles because they vibrate at rates discordant with its own. A coarse body attracts them because their vibrations accord with its own. Hence, if the body changes its rates of vibration, it gradually drives out of it the constituents that cannot fall into the new rhythm, and fills up their places by drawing in from external nature fresh constituents that are harmonious. Nature provides materials vibrating in all possible ways, and each body exercises its own selective action.
So this is a principle that we will see applied to all the different aspects of what we call a human being. There is some kind of vibration, if we want to put it in this way, that consciousness can impose on the vehicles of consciousness, meaning the physical body, or as we are going to see, the emotional body, the mental body. And according to that vibration that consciousness imposes is the kind of matter that will be attracted to the body. Now that matter itself will become a hindrance or will become a helping factor in the expression of consciousness. So it's a little like, if you want to run a marathon, you have to reshape your body so that the body doesn't become an obstacle for that. If you don't work on your body and you want to run a marathon, you won't be able to do it, or it will be very difficult. So in the same way, if you want to generate an awareness, a perception that can perceive the subtler aspects of life, then you have to make your body able to respond to this kind of perception, to this kind of activity. So in the Theosophical view, it's not only a question of consciousness, or it's not only a question of matter. Consciousness and matter are constantly interacting because these are two aspects of a single principle, and we need to pay attention to both aspects, from this point of view. So she will explain a little more about this.
By his thoughts he strikes the keynote of his music and sets up the rhythms that are the most powerful factors in the continual changes in his physical and other bodies. As his knowledge increases, he learns how to build up his physical body with pure food, and so facilitates the tuning of it. He learns to live by the axiom of purification: pure food, pure mind, and constant memory of God.
That's a saying from Hinduism that they use sometimes, similar to from the Greeks, a healthy mind in a healthy body. So the idea is that the level of consciousness in which we live during our daily life sets the vibration that we have on the physical plane, and that tends to generate in our physical body that kind of vibration. So when we eat or when we breathe in, or all the ways that we interchange matter with the environment, the body will tend to retain the atoms that are, as we said, in tune with that vibration that is set by consciousness. Now, if you eat or if you are in a very polluted environment, of course the percentage of healthy atoms, let's say, will be less than if you are in a healthy environment. Same with the food. There is certain kind of food that, because of the way it is, because of the source, the way it is prepared, it tends to attract the kind of coarser atoms. So if you eat that food, then your consciousness has less proportion of good atoms to choose from. So the idea here is that there are two aspects to which we can pay attention to make sure that our consciousness works in a higher state, not negative emotions or negative thoughts. Try to encourage the positive emotions and the positive thoughts. So then that has an impact on the body, but at the same time, try to provide the body as pure food and exercise as you are able to, because the physical body may many times becomes a hindrance for what consciousness wants to do, or may help what the sensitivity of consciousness.
The more impressions the body can answer to, the more useful does it become, for only those to which it can answer can reach the consciousness. Not yet is developed the perfect body that shall thrill to every pulse in nature. The vibrations that the body is able to receive is transmitted to physical centers. The etheric vibrations which accompany all the vibrations of the denser physical constituents are similarly received by the etheric double and transmuted to its corresponding centers. The etheric also passes on the vibrations to the astral body, whence, as we shall see later, they reach the mind.
So first is the idea that our physical body, our consciousness can communicate with the physical plane through the physical body, as we said. If our physical body is dull, is insensitive, then there are many things that are missed by our consciousness. This is why many spiritual teachers talk about the need to become more sensitive in life. Of course, this sensitivity begins with consciousness. If our awareness is asleep, works in a mechanical way, then we are not sensitive to things around just because we don't perceive them. We don't perceive how, what our actions are producing around. We don't perceive what is going on in the outside, world. So part of the work is, as we are going to see, to develop on becoming more and more aware. At the same time, our body needs to become more sensitive so that our consciousness can relate to the world from a deeper point, from a deeper perspective. And then the etheric double, when we perceive things through the physical body, that produces a reaction on the etheric double, and then the etheric double produces a reaction on the emotional body, which is the next one that comes, and then that one on the mental body, and that's how we perceive things at the intellectual level, as we are going to see. But the point here is that in the Theosophical view, there is usually a balanced view of the body, neither to think that is the most important aspect, nor to think that is useless for the spiritual life.
But so little is man yet developed that even the etheric double is not yet sufficiently harmonized to regularly convey to consciousness impressions received by it independently of its denser comrade, or to impress them on his brain. Occasionally it succeeds in doing so, and then we have the lowest form of clairvoyance, the seeing of the etheric doubles of physical objects, and of things that have etheric bodies as their lowest vesture.
As we are going to see, there are senses on each one of the bodies. Normally we perceive through our physical senses, because the senses on all these other bodies are not developed. when the etheric senses begin to develop, the person has what we could call a kind of etheric clairvoyance. That person can see the etheric double of objects or people. But at this point in evolution, in the Theosophical view, we are only halfway in the process of evolution. The senses that are fully developed are only the physical, and the other senses are going to be developed little by little in evolution.
The physical brain is the instrument of consciousness in waking life on the physical plane, and consciousness works in it, in the average person, more effectively than in any other vehicle. Its potentialities are less than those of the subtle vehicles, but its actualities are greater, and the man knows himself as I, in the physical body, ere he finds himself elsewhere.
So at this point in evolution, the body that is working most effectively is the physical body in most people. Although the physical body, as we are going to see, is the most limited of all the bodies. Even the etheric body is not subject to so many limitations as the physical, and least of all the emotional or astral body and the mental bodies. Although the physical body is the most limited of them, in most people the physical body is the one that is developed to a greater extent. So for all practical purposes, the physical body is far better than the inner bodies. But as a person begins to walk the spiritual path, then things change. So in our next meeting, we are going to explore the next plane, the astral plane, the characteristics and the different kind of entities and energies that are there, as well as the astral body, the next subtle body. As we are going to see, this is connected to our emotions. So we are going to begin to explore how we can work on the emotions so that the emotional body, just as we saw with the physical body, the emotional body can be purified so that it becomes a better instrument of consciousness. And that's more or less a pattern that she will follow for the next planes. So we will see some practical aspects for each chapter.